17 and 18. Chapter 16. Bert says goodbye. Let me get comfortable. Okay, let's start. Spittleworth noticed a commotion beside the palace walls, and strained to see what was going on. When he spotted the woman on the ground, he heard the cries in shock and pity. He suddenly realized that he'd left a loose end that might yet rip him up. The widow. As he rode past the little knot of people in the crowd who were fanning Miss Beamish's face, Spittleworth knew that his longed-for bath must be postponed, and his crafty brain began to race again. Once the king's party was safely in the courtyard and servants had hurried to assist Fred from his horse, Spittleworth had pulled Major Roach aside. "The widow, Beamish's widow," he muttered. "Why didn't you send her word about his death?" "It never occurred to me, my lord," said Roach truthfully. He'd been too busy thinking about the jeweled sword and the way home, how best to sell it, and whether it would be better to break it up into pieces so that nobody recognized it. "Curse you, Roach. Must I think of everything?" snarled Spittleworth. "Go now. Take Beamish's body out of those filthy cloaks, cover it with the cornucopian flag, and lay him down out in the blue parlor. Put guards on the door, and then bring Miss Beamish to me in the throne room. Also give the order that these soldiers must not go home or talk to their families until I've spoken to them. It's essential that we tell the same story. Now hurry, fool, hurry. Beamish's widow could ruin everything." Spittleworth pushed his way past soldiers and stable boys to where Flapoon was being lifted off his horse, kept the king away from the throne room and the blue parlor. Spittleworth whispered in Flapoon's ear, encouraged him to go to bed. Flapoon nodded, and Spittleworth hurried away through the dimly lit palace corridors, casting off his dusty riding coat as he went and bellowing at the servants to fetch him fresh clothes. Once in the deserted throne room, Spittleworth pulled on his clean jacket and ordered a maid to light a single lamp and bring him a glass of wine. Then he waited. At last there came a knock on the door. "Enter," shouted Spittleworth, and in came Major Roche, accompanied by a white-faced Miss Beamish and young Bert. "My dear Miss Beamish, my very dear Miss Beamish," said Spittleworth, striding toward her and clasping her free hand. "The king has asked me to tell you how deeply sorry he is. I add my own condolences. What a tragedy. What an awful tragedy. Why did nobody send word? Sobbed Miss Beamish. Why did we have to find out by seeing his poor body? She swayed a little, and Roger hurried to fetch a small golden chair. Then the maid, who was called Hetty, arrived with wine for Spittleworth, and while she was pouring it, Spittleworth said, "Dear lady, we did in fact send word. We sent a messenger, didn't we, Roach?" "That's right," said Roach. "We sent a young lad called..." But here Roach got stuck. He was a man of very little imagination. Nobody said, Spittleworth, saying the first name that came into his head. "Little Nobby Buttons," he added, because the flickering lamplight had just illuminated one of Roach's golden buttons. "Yes, Little Nobby Buttons," volunteered, and off he galloped. What could have become of him? "Roach," said Spittleworth, "we must send out a search party at once to see whether any trace of body Buttons can be found." "At once, my lord," said Roach, bowing deeply, and he left. How did my husband die?" whispered Miss Beamish. "Well, madam," said Spittleworth, speaking carefully, for he knew that the story he told now would become the official version, and that he has to stick by it forevermore. "As you may have heard, we journeyed to the marshlands because we'd received word that the Ickabog had carried off a doll. Shortly after our arrival, I regret to say that our entire party was attacked by the monster. It lunged for the king first, but he fought most bravely, sinking his sword into the monster's neck. To the tough-skinned Ickabog, however, there was but a wasp sting. Enraged in some further victims, and thought Major Beamish put up the most heroic struggle. I regret to say that he laid down his life for the king. The Lord Flapoon had excellent notions of firing his blunderbuss, which scared the Ickabog away. We brought poor Beamish out of the marsh, asked for a volunteer to take his news of his death to his family. Dear Little Nobby Buttons said he'd do it, and he leapt up onto his horse, and until we reached Joseville, I never doubted that he'd arrive and given you warning of his dreadful tragedy. Can I see my husband?" wept Miss Beamish. Of course," said Spittleworth. "He's in the blue parlor." He led Miss Beamish and Bert, who was still clutching his mother's hand, to the doors of the parlor, where he paused. "I regret," he said, "that we cannot remove the flag covering him. His injuries would be far too distressing for you to see. The fang and claw marks, you know." Miss Beamish swayed yet again, and Bert grabbed hold of her to keep her upright. Now Lord Flapoon walked up to the group holding the tray of pies. "King's in bed," he said thickly to Spittleworth. "Oh, hello," he added, looking at Miss Beamish, who was one of the few servants whose name he knew, because she baked the pastries. "Sorry about the Major," said Flapoon, spraying Miss Beamish and Bert with crumbs of pie crust. Always liked him. He walked away, leaving Spittleworth to open the door of the blue parlor to let Miss Beamish and Bert inside. There lay the body of Major Beamish, concealed beneath the cornucopian flag. "Can I at least kiss him one last time?" sobbed Miss Beamish. "Quite impossible, I'm afraid," said Spittleworth. "His face is half gone. His hand..." "Mother," said Bert, speaking for the first time, "I'm sure his hand will be all right." And before Spittleworth could stop the boy, Bert reached beneath the flag for his father's hand, which was quite unmarked. Miss Beamish knelt down and kissed the hand over and over again until it shone with tears as though made Beamish is out of sight, Spittleworth hurried off the guard's room, where he found Roach keeping watch over the rest of the royal guard. The walls of the room were hung with swords and portraits of King Fred, whose eyes seemed to watch everything that was happening. "They're growing restless, my lord," muttered Roach. "They want to go home to their families and get to bed. And so they shall, once we've had a little chat," said Spittleworth, moving to face the weary and trouble-stained soldiers. "Has anyone got any questions about what happened back in the marshlands?" he asked the men. The soldiers looked at one another. Some of them stole furtive glances at Roach, who had retreated against the wall and was polishing a rifle. Captain Goodfellow raised his hand along with 2 other soldiers. "Why was Beamish's body wrapped up before any of us could look at it?" asked Captain Goodfellow. "I want to know where that bullet went that we heard being fired," said the second soldier. "How come only 4 people saw this monster, if it is so huge?" asked the third. The general nods and muttered agreement. "All excellent questions," replied Spittleworth smoothly. "Let me explain." And he repeated the story of the attack that he told Miss Beamish. The soldiers who had asked questions remained unsatisfied. "I still reckon it's funny that a huge monster was out there and none of us saw it," said the third. "If Beamish was half eaten, why wasn't there more blood?" asked the second. "And who in the name of all that's holy, said Captain Goodfellow, "is Noby Buttons?" "How did you know about Noby Buttons?" blurted Spittleworth without thinking. "On my way here from the stables, I bumped into one of the maids, Hetty," said Goodfellow. "She served you your wine, my lord. According to her, you've just been telling Beamish's poor wife about a member of the royal guard called Noby Buttons. According to you, Noby Buttons was sent with a message to Beamish's wife telling her he'd been killed. But I don't remember a Noby Buttons. I've never met anyone called Noby Buttons. So I ask you, my lord, how can that be? How can a man ride with us and camp with us and take orders from you, lordship, right in front of us without any of us clapping eyes on him?" Spittleworth's first thought was that he had to do something about that eavesdropping maid. Luckily, Goodfellow had given him her name. Then he said in a dangerous voice, "What gives you the right to speak for everybody, Captain Goodfellow? Perhaps some of these men have better memories than you do. Perhaps they remember poor Noby Buttons clearly. Dear little Noby, in whose memory the king will add a fat bag of gold for everybody's pay this week. Proud, brave Noby, whose sacrifice, for I fear the monster has eaten him, as well as Beamish, will mean a pay raise for all his comrades in arms. Noble Noby Buttons, whose closest friends are surely marked for speedy promotion." Another silence followed Spittleworth's words. With his silence had a cold, heavy quality. Now the whole royal guard understood the choice facing them. They weighed in their minds in huge influence Spittleworth was known to have over the king, and the fact that Major Roach was now caressing the barrel of his rifle in the menacing manner, and they remembered the sudden death of their former leader, Major Beamish. They also considered the promise of more gold and speedy promotions if they agreed to believe in the Ickabog and in private Noby Buttons. Goodfellow stood up so suddenly that his chair clattered to the floor. There never was a Noby Buttons, and I'm damned if there's an Ickabog, and I won't be party to a lie. The other two men who had asked questions stood up as well, but the rest of the royal guard remained seated, silent and watchful. Very well, said Spittleworth. You three are under arrest for the filthy crime of treason. As I'm sure your comrades remember, you ran away when the Ickabog appeared. You forgot your duty to protect the king, and though only of saving your own cowardly hides. The penalty is death by firing squad. He chose 8 soldiers to take the 3 men away, and even though the 3 honest soldiers struggled very hard, they were outnumbered and overwhelmed, and in no time at all they've been dragged out of the guard's room. Very good, said Spittleworth to the few soldiers remaining. Very good indeed. There will be pay raises all around, and I shall remember your names when it comes to promotions now. Don't forget to tell your families exactly what happened in the marshlands. It might bode ill for your wives, your partners, and your children if they heard to question the existence of Ickabog or of Noby Buttons. You may not return home. He's the bad man. Bad man. Bad man. Poor Miss Beamish. And she doesn't know the truth. Thank you guys for sticking around. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, share, comment, and I will talk to you later. Bye.